Do you want your red aquarium plants to pop? Well, today I'm going to go through and tell you the secrets on how you can make a thriving aquarium with red aquarium plants and have them thrive. Let's set a goal together. I'm going to help you go into 2025 with the reddest crimson red aquarium plants from everything that I've learned going through this hobby. First and foremost, let's talk about some of the top red plants. So I really love Rotala Super Red, the blood red line. No, Super Red. Yeah, Super Reds. And I have some right here. They're regrowing because I trimmed them all down when I did a huge cut. I have some over here as well that are growing up. They're some of the easiest plants to grow. Now, if you don't have the right proper lighting, they'll be more of a yellow type of orange, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Next one's going to be the Ludwigia. So I have some Ludwigia right here. I have one that I just cut. You'll see a clip going in of some close-ups that I had them in before I trimmed them and moved the things around and trying to regrow a specific area over here, which I'm struggling with these rabbit snails. Rabbit snails are amazing and fun to watch, but they love to uproot plants when you have a nice thin substrate like I do. And I love my rabbit snails, so I'm just dealing with it. The next one's the alternative Reneki. I don't know, I think that's how you say it. I have some right here. I have one right here, which is going to be a focal point of us talking about red plants here. Then you have the red tiger lotus, and you'll see a clip right now. This tank has 0 CO2 on it. It is my Caridina tank, my nano tank, one of my most thriving aquariums for my Caridina lines that I first, this is like my second Caridina tank that I set up. And the red tiger lotus, you'll see some Rotala super reds in there as well. Thriving, no CO2. But those are some of the top red aquarium plants that are easy for beginners to get into, and you going into 2025 can go out and purchase to help excel. All right, let's talk about what makes plants red. First and foremost, lighting uptake, creating that photosynthesis, allowing your plants to create that optimal pigmentation, that crimson red, is one of the most important parts of your aquarium setup. It's definitely the lighting and the uptake of nutrients like iron and potassium into your plants that give it that high pigmentation when it's creating the photosynthesis from the lights. That's going to roll us right into number 2, which is lighting. Lighting with the correct spectrums of red and blue, which are a large requirement for creating these red hues that you see from the PR ratings with your lighting itself, is definitely one of the most important. I run Chihiros lighting here for all of these plants, as well as that Caridina tank that you just saw with the red tiger lotus, helping that plant or multiple plants grow an optimal uptake of nutrients into those plants themselves. Iron mainly plays that key part of that uptake of nutrients that creates that pigmentation into those plants as well. So again, lighting is one of the biggest factors, making sure you're covering all of the spectrums, blue and red included, with a high intensity of those uptaking into your aquarium itself. Now, Chihiros Lighting has some of the best lighting preset settings. You can, of course, customize them. I'm not sponsored by them. This is just my experience. I have done things with the Twin Star lighting line, and I haven't had major success because they don't go as deep. I did and am trying in this new build that you're going to see coming out soon, it with that, because it's not as deep of a tank. It's only 6 inches, and we'll see if I'm still going to be able to get some red hues. But I haven't had great success with deeper tanks because the density needs to go from the top all the way down and penetrate through the water itself to your lower end plants. We'll talk about that case in point where you see this one is super red and this one's more of a crimson, not bright, vibrant red because of lighting. And then the reason it's not hitting all the way down to here is my floating plants are inhibiting light to contract all the way through to the bottom of the actual aquarium itself. So number 2, definitely lighting. Now if you do go out and buy lighting, just be aware you don't want to go full bore on the lighting settings because you'll have an algae breakout, which is never a good thing. So slowly increment into it as your aquarium adjusts from beneficial bacteria and uptake of nutrients if you don't have a lot of plants. If you're adding a lot of nutrients with not a lot of plants, then you're going to have an issue with algae breakout. That's going to start trying to bloom and take the nutrients away. So again, having enough plants to cover areas. Floating plants are great at taking nutrients out of the water column, so highly recommend those to help offset that first initiation into going with a higher density light. Next one is fertilization. So I use the API, no, not API, AP, no, 2-Hour Aquarius. Thank you. I had to think about that. So I used to use the API liquid fertilizers. Terrible. They're not as stringent on making sure their mixing of their batches are coming out correctly. So it's always kind of just a gamble when you're dosing. I've had great success with APT. So I'm not trying to throw shade, it's just from my experience. With 2-Hour Aquarius, their APT brand line, I think it's their APT. Where's my fertilizer at? Here it is. It is 2-Hour Aquarius. I think it's their APT one. I don't know. You'll see it in the description. But for my 20-gallon tank, I'm doing 1 pump every day because it has CO2 on it. Same thing with this 20-gallon tank. And I'm dosing sometimes, not a lot, my Caridina tank that has that red tiger lotus and also the blood reds. Well, super reds. Yeah. So nutrients is a big part in uptake from the water column, but also the substrate. So if you do start to see some decaying plants at the lower stem area, that's typically because the higher end is feeding off the water column and the lower end isn't getting enough nutrients as well. So basically what you can do for that, and kind of a lighting perspective from there too, but what you can do is you can go through and replace with root tabs. So if you didn't set up the correct substrate of nutrients for your stem plants, then what you're going to need to go through and do is add some root tabs. Just be aware whatever substrate you had before. I'm going to be coming out with a new substrate video. It should be capped because you don't want that nutrient to leave the substrate and then go into the water column, because there are different density of nutrients in root tabs than there are in liquid fertilizers. So you don't want to have too much nutrients in the water column because then you're going to have an algae breakout again. But you can go through and add root tabs. I use the 2-Hour Aquarius root tabs as well. Highly recommend their brand and line. Really love what they're doing. Again, not sponsored by anybody. This is just from my experience. And you can go through and re-add those into the substrate. You've probably seen my last video of the secrets of maintaining, where I went through and did that for some of my greens, not my reds. But I do that same thing for some of my reds. If I see any like stunted growth, things aren't growing as quick enough as I would anticipate, then I go through and add some root tabs into those areas. I'm again dosing almost every day with liquid fertilizers in these 2 aquariums here because there's CO2, which is going to move us on to the next one. So CO2 is not required, but it helps. So it does help with going through, and if you're a beginner like I am, I went out and just purchased off Amazon a CO2 kit that's refillable. It wasn't hard at all, and I was worried about the chemistry and everything like that, but come on, you're keeping an aquarium, you now know chemistry, you can do this as well. So don't feel like you may struggle with it. If you do have any questions, you'll see my recommendation for which one I use below. But yeah, CO2 does help the aquarium plants and your reds uptake nutrients at a quicker rate, and that also results in quicker growth. So highly recommend using CO2. It's not required, but if you have the option to do it, definitely throw that on. I have an aquarium that has that without CO2 in it, as you've all seen, still producing high density reds. It's just a slower growth rate, which is perfect for me. It's a 5-gallon nano tank. I don't need things to grow at an accelerated rate. So if you're not worried about accelerated rate of growth, then you don't need CO2. But if you want accelerated rate of growth, add CO2. And it helps just create a higher uptake in nutrients, so you can add more nutrients into that aquarium than you would have been able to without having CO2. So recommended, but not required. Required is light and nutrients for deeper crimson reds. All right, next one is going to be some stressing techniques, which you can stress out reds by creating lower nitrates, which is lowering the amount of nutrient uptakes that your plants can utilize from the aquarium. So as you saw over here, I had 0 nitrates in my secrets to maintaining an aquarium. I haven't tested this one, but I'm just going to assume it's probably in the same area, which creates a stress factor into your aquarium plants because it doesn't have automatic nutrients in the water itself. So you're adding fertilization or adding in root tabs to uptake nutrients from them, which is kind of like stressing them out, which helps create these higher end density reds that you don't typically see in aquariums. And even in my other aquarium, again, being aware that I'll test it, but I'm gonna assume as well that that has really low nitrates in it too. But being aware that you can create a stress factor in your plants to create a denser red pigmentation is another way with uptake of water column nutrients that you're adding in versus it feeding off the nitrates just directly in your water itself. Next one is going to be combating algae. So there are great inhabitants. I've just fell in love with the Pinocchio shrimp because they do eat hair algae, and they are tremendously helpful in your aquarium, and they're the most fun to watch. Now, Amano shrimp are great. Yes, everyone loves them. I just have fell in love with Pinocchio shrimp in the way that they glide in the water or fly around in your aquarium, and they do eat hair algae in comparative to our Amano shrimp where they don't really touch hair algae as much. And I'm saying the dense threaded hair algae. So truly love them. I try not to dose any more in my aquarium. The reason being is I have inhabitants in there that don't do well with algicide. So I try to stay clear and add inhabitants and lower my dosing if I see any breakouts of algae of any nutrients that I add into it. I don't eliminate it, I still add it because my plants need to grow quicker than my algae does, so I just limit the amount of nutrients that I'm adding into it. Again, CO2 really helps with this because it's it's enabling your plants to grow quicker than your algae is because it's uptaking nutrients more when you have CO2 because it's growing at a quicker rate. So that's why CO2 is helpful, not a requirement, again, like I said, just helpful. Now, red aquarium plants are definitely tricky, but with the right care and the right maintenance, you'll be able to excel your red aquarium plants like I have going into 2025 in transforming your aquarium into a masterpiece. Hopefully you found this helpful, and if you did, please take this moment to like and subscribe. And I would love to hear from you. What are your most favorite red aquarium plants? Feel free to comment below. But until next time, I'll see you all on the build video that we'll be doing together.